Facebook has become a rather interesting little device on the internet. I think when I first heard about it, I thought it's a way to connect with my friends, maybe people that don't live locally anymore, people I haven't seen in years. But it's become this way, I think, to sort of embarrass us from years past, right? Because you have this thing where you can shoot back all these old photos when some of us had a different appearance than they have today. So I was scanning through Facebook the other day, and somebody had posted a picture of Elisa and I from way back, 1984, I think it was, our first year of marriage, and we're at seminary. So I know some of you saw that because you commented on it. So how many saw that picture? Burn that picture. Actually, it's a great one of Elisa, but I look very not happy, don't I, in that picture? I don't know what's going on there, but so it made me think about my seminary days, and I don't know what it was like for you in high school, college, graduate school, but when I went off to seminary, I was a little out of my league, a little out of my depths, didn't feel comfortable. I especially didn't feel comfortable when it came to Greek. You know, as Presbyterian ministers, one of the things that sets us apart from a lot of clergy, we have to take Greek, we have to take Hebrew, we have to be able to go back to those original languages and translate. It's a big part of what you do at seminary. So I'm coming into seminary, and I've never had Greek, and I don't even know the alphabet because I didn't join a fraternity, so I don't get the whole Greek thing, even in the letters, so it's a big learning experience. So I get in there, and the one thing that I was always hoping wouldn't happen, you see, your homework was to go home and translate passages, and you had to come into class. And then the professor, who was a kind of intimidating guy, would call on you. And I'm in class, and I'm praying, Lord, not me. Lord, not me. Don't let him call on me. Lord, not me. Because if he calls on me, I have to translate. Number one, I have to say these Greek words like exousia, which we're going to talk about today. We talked about last week. And then I'm going to embarrass myself in front of my classmates and in front of the professor. And it was a really, really uncomfortable place. I had little confidence there. Now, today, here I am, all these years later. It's 2018. And I have some confidence. Here's my confidence. My family will tell you I know how to cook bacon, don't I, Lisa? I am the world's best bacon cooker, unless you're Rosemary Robinson, who likes hers so crispy that it falls apart. But I like that leathery bacon, that just melts in your mouth when you chew on it. It's kind of like beef jerky. So I'm an expert at that. I'm also an expert at lawn care. I know everything there is to know about lawn care, and I can make my yard the best yard in the neighborhood. And so that both being an excellent bacon cooker and a lawn care specialist, I can teach you how to do that. I'm an expert. I have confidence. I'm sort of an authority in those two areas. Try it sometime. You make lots of friends as an excellent bacon cooker, by the way. So I can show you all those things. I can show you how to do it yourself. It's a nice gift to be able to do. Now, last week, we talked about a subject that I've basically referred to just now as authority. And I asked you, where was your authority? Where's the authority in your life? And we talked all about authority and what it meant. And I left at the end saying, would you like to know how that might make a difference in your life? And you said, yes. Well, sort of, you said that. I inferred you were saying that. I could see it in your minds. And so I said you had to come back today. So evidently, you came back today. You may have forgotten that you said yes, but you came back anyway, and I'm glad that you're here. So I want to share this indisputable fact with you right now of the Christian faith. There are a lot of them. I'm going to talk about one today. That if you're a Christ follower, a Christian, Christ follower with a surrendered heart to God through Jesus Christ, that's what makes you a Christian, through Jesus, you have what I talked about last week. You have the it factor. And I'm not going to get into all of that, what about it factors, but you know what I'm talking about. You have that it factor of authority. And here's the part that's really kind of mind-boggling. You have it whether you believe it or not. You have authority. Now, we looked at Mark, the Gospel of Mark, first chapter, a little story there of Jesus going into the synagogue in Capernaum, and he does a miracle. And after he does this miracle, people watching what he did, he cast out an evil spirit, and people watched that. And here's what they said. I think this is going to pop up on the screen, just verses 27 and 28. This is the end of what we looked at last week. Here's what happened. At the very end of what he had done, Mark reports they were all, meaning all those people that watched, they're in the synagogue, captive audience. They were all amazed, and they kept on asking one another, what is this? What is this? It's a new teaching with authority. As you read that, and we talked a little bit about the backstory of this, but here's what's going on. Jesus appeared to have authority beyond that of any of the rabbis they had seen. And there were a lot of rabbis. So I'm going to give you, here's 101 on rabbis today. Later on, you'll be an expert in the Super Bowl, but right now you're going to be an expert in rabbis. Rabbis all have a what? Thank you. Who said that? Karen, I should have known. You read my notes, didn't you? No, she didn't. I put my notes out in the Welcome Center so anybody who wants them can answer these questions and you can be an expert. Just grab them on your way in next time. So rabbis all have a rabbi. That's how it works. And all disciples follow their rabbi. You can't be a disciple if you don't study, if you don't emulate, if you don't follow your rabbi. So the disciples of a particular rabbi, those disciples, they would mirror their rabbi. That means they would say what they said, teach what they teach, do what they did. Whatever it was, that was your job. And if they taught, they would teach when they became rabbis themselves, they would teach their students the same. It just passed on. So here's the extraordinary aspect or truth about Jesus. Go read your whole New Testament. Jesus didn't have a what? He didn't have a rabbi. Why'd they call him rabbi? Everybody called him rabbi. Go read your New Testament. That every time somebody came up, they said, rabbi, rabbi, rabbi. They identified Jesus as a rabbi, but you can't be a rabbi unless you studied under a rabbi. So who is Jesus as a rabbi? You go, what difference does it make? Makes a lot. Was Jesus rabbi less? The answer is no. Then who was Jesus's rabbi? Who did Jesus follow? Who did Jesus emulate? Who did Jesus take those teachings and teach to other people? Who did Jesus watch do amazing things and then go do amazing things? Who was it? Yeah, Jesus did have a rabbi. It was God. Everything he did, amazing. And when they say he has authority like we've never seen before, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? If Jesus' rabbi is God, of course, he's going to have authority like they haven't seen before. Because the human rabbis at the time they just didn't quite they were missing that bit of authenticity in some ways. As we stand here today, Super Bowl Sunday, there are other truths too. And here's the truth. You have it too. You have that it factor of authority and authenticity. And you're going, not sure. Sounds good, Joe. Not sure. Not for me. I'll tell this story here. Everybody saw the Star Wars movies, right? Now, there's one of the Star Wars movies. It's that last one where Luke reveals to Leia that they are, in fact, related. They're related because they both have the it factor of the force, right? So Luke's trying to explain this thing, how it gets passed on and how it happens. And he goes, this force is strong in my family. It was strong with my dad. My father had it. He goes, I have it. And my sister has it. And that's his way of subtly referring to Leah, that in fact she is his sister and she has it too. This passed on it factor. The movie calls it the force, but that's just an illustration. So I'm saying you have it, we have it too. And you go, not sure. Here's the proofs. I'm going to go through these kind of quick today because we're going to move into communion soon. Romans 8:5 says that when Jesus was commissioning the 12 to go out, and they're like their first little journeys out to test the waters of how do they do out in the community 2 by 2 by themselves, he gave them a measure, okay? A measure mean, if you're measuring something, it's some content. He gave them a measure of his authority. Now in Mark 6:7, Jesus gives the 12, again, authority, exousia, that word we looked at, that's the Greek for authority, over impure spirits when he sent them out to preach. Same thing that he did in the synagogue that Jesus did, now the disciples are empowered to go and do. Now, when Jesus is about to leave the earth, He's been crucified, he's resurrected, he's gathered together with the disciples, and he's about to leave the earth. Matthew 28:18, many of us know this passage. He says, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Now I'm commissioning you. What's the commission? I'll keep going. Go out, make disciples, just as I did, just what any follower of a rabbi would do. Make disciples, just as I did. Teach them the exact things I taught you, just as any disciple would do from their rabbi. Now, I want you to follow this logic. I like logic. Some people don't like logic. I like logic. If God is Jesus' rabbi, follow this with me. If God is Jesus' rabbi, and Jesus is the disciples' rabbi, and now anyone claiming Jesus as Lord and Savior becomes a disciple also of Jesus, and Jesus' disciples have given authority, where does that leave us? I mean, we can say no all we want, but it's truth, and it's kingdom logic. And so this is really, really good news. You're going, no. That means, I have to have authority from Jesus. What's going to happen to me? Don't worry about that. Because the great news is it's not about us. I love this. I don't have to measure up to have Jesus' authority. It doesn't matter about status, as I said last week. It doesn't matter about any of your self-doubts about anything that you are. None of that matters because your authority, your it factor, doesn't come from you. It comes from Jesus because it comes from his rabbi. We called it last week delegated empowerment, not derived from self. So you can't just say, I don't have that. But here's the other part of the good news. It also gives you the ability to ignore and deny and not listen to a voice that would tell you that you are less than. I'll let that sink in for a minute. You may feel that sometimes. People do feel this. Not capable, unworthy. But we can't listen to that voice, nor should we listen to that voice, if you have, by logic, Jesus' delegated empowerment. And this is the difference that I wanted to talk about today. This is the difference that authority makes. It's the capacity we have. If you want to claim faith in Jesus Christ, it's the capacity we have due to our position. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how smart you are. Doesn't matter what you scored on your IQ test. None of that matters. All that matters is claiming to be a follower of Jesus Christ, accepting that into your heart. And then God guides us through Scripture to act in this faith with this authority. This is the defining authority in our lives. Knowing and believing in confidence, not about cooking bacon or having a great yard. It's a knowledge that when we speak, to other human beings about matters of importance in faith, there's validity in our words. There's authority in those words. As I said last week, you have personal authority. That is, you have something to say, and we all can show it through living words. Living words, that means action, living words, just like Jesus. I came across a story about old Scottish philosopher and skeptic David Hume. And one day, of course, this is back in the days when you had these very, very fiery evangelists were very popular, and they're touring the world, and hundreds, and this is before Billy Graham, hundreds and hundreds of people were coming out and they're listening. So this guy, who's not a believer, who's not a Christian, and he was well known as a skeptic, and he was, people knew he didn't buy into all this stuff, but he went to go hear George Whitefield, and he's there listening to this fiery, impassioned preacher that people were so just enthralled that people were coming to Jesus. It was incredible. So he goes and sees, and then somebody spots them. It's one of those deals. And they go, "Hey, what are you doing here? I thought you didn't believe in any of this stuff. And here you are listening to this guy preach the gospel." So Hume replies, "I don't believe it." But then he looks up toward Whitefield and he nods and he goes, "But he does." In other words, just the authority of speaking the gospel of love, even a non-believer respected that authority, that personal authenticity, and it made a difference. And that's what it means to have personal authenticity anyway. It's being true and honest with ourselves and others. We have credibility in our words. And the very important part, behavior, words and behavior. So there's a fellow, Roy Bennett, he wrote a little article called 5 Signs of Personal Authority, and I want to pick on just one. He says this: a lack of self-reflection can be the greatest barrier to authenticity. He says we cannot be our most genuine selves, after all, if we have no idea who that is. And unfortunately, he says, many of us don't. But that can't be true for Christians. We have to know. It's unmistakable. It's kingdom logic. Many years ago, when I first came to this church, I preached a sermon called "The Balloon Man of Ganado," and I won't get into all of that. We were out on the Navajo reservation, and I had a group of students with me. And as groups of students are wont to do, when they are bored, they will find almost anything to do. So these guys had this idea of making a balloon man. And so they got some clothes. I think there's a picture of this, I hope. They got some clothes. They all chipped in some clothes, and they got balloons. And so this is what you do on a mission trip when you have nothing left to do, right? You make a balloon man. So there he is. They make this guy, and they were wrestling with him. They took pictures with him. It was the balloon man of Ganado. And when I was thinking about this message today, and I was thinking about reflecting internally about who we are and the authority God gives us, I thought about the balloon man. The balloon man is hollow. There's nothing inside. It's balloons full of air. It's hollow. He's a hollow man. He's not real. There's no substance inside of him. Jesus wants us and offers us a real fullness in our lives. And a part of this fullness is the authority to act and to speak for Jesus, our rabbi. Because our most genuine self, we want to go back to that little self-reflective part, our most genuine self is found in him. He pours his authority. As we come to this table, he's pouring his authority into us. He's pouring himself into us. So when you come to this meal, you have to know that the outside world has no power to limit the expectations and ideas of what God thinks and wills you to be. So as I close, tonight during the Super Bowl, there's going to be these giant hulking football players. They're big, they're fierce, they're powerful, they got all the pads on, they're ready to go. However, with that being said, there will be a few people on the field tonight, and they don't have helmets, they won't have pads, and they're only armed with a little tiny whistle, right? The zebra guys, there they are. They're little guys, aren't they? If you see these guys next to the football players, these are the smallest people on the field, minus the kicker probably. These are the smallest people on the field. Yet, they have all the authority in the game, don't they? They can stop the play. They can kick a player out of the game. They can kick a 350-pound offensive lineman out of the game. Jesus says that we are that little guy. You ever thought of it like that? Because he's saying, I'm giving you authority over all the powers of the enemy. And that's where our strength comes from. His authority means we can tell evil to be quiet too, just like Jesus did that day in the synagogue. We can quiet down the voices that might hurt, the voices inside that tell us we're not an authority, we're not an expert, we don't have a right to share, we don't have a right to go out and live our lives for Christ in a certain way and make a difference in the world. Yes, we do. We do have a right. We have authority to do that in our families, in our church, in our community. If we were to do this as a church, if you walked out of this church today fully buying into this kingdom logic of personal authority for Jesus Christ in your life, we would change the dynamic here forever. We'd have to build a bigger sanctuary. That's why it makes a difference. Here's our last statement, and I'm going to ask our folks to come up and help with communion. Pastor Adrian Rogers says, it's time we told the enemy to take a hike because you have kingdom authority and you really don't have to live a defeated life. Would you join me in prayer? Lord.